myself. So great, thanks. I'm Mike Freeze. I manage the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, and I just wanted to give a brief introduction of what we're going to talk about and really what's been up to since 2013 and the passage of Act 20. But quick, because there's no good way to segue it, I wanted to introduce Joe Dwyer. Joe's here. Joe is, some of you may know that I also manage the state's coastal management program. So Joe is here as a coastal management fellow, working both with the Land Information Program, Coastal Management Program, and the University of Wisconsin Sea Grant. And he's going to talk a little bit about what he's up to, as well as make a plea for some data later. So yeah, thanks. So a little bit about what's been going on. So of course, subsequent to the passage of Act 20, people have now seen our base budget grant threshold has gone up to $100,000. So we're funding the difference between what some of those counties are retaining and $100,000. So we're getting more money out. In addition to that, we're providing the $50,000 strategic initiative grants. We're on our third iteration of the parcel map, and spent the last thing I was going to mention. But we're and the training education grants for $1,000. But the last thing I wanted to mention is the 6 months that we've been spending on working on the WLIP plan. You know, it was a process of working with the stakeholders, the Land Information Council, putting together a plan on how to approach the Land Information Program in a strategic manner to do things beyond the parcel mapping project, and to continue to show the value of the WLIP to the constituency, to state agencies, to the private community, as well as the legislators. And Peter and Jim are going to talk a little bit more about that. And I guess one more thing I wanted to mention too is right now, some people may know that I used to chair the Coastal States Organization, and with that represented that organization on the National Digital Coast Partnership. Through that, we were able to capture a Digital Coast fellow, someone analogous to Joe, working with CSO and the Association of State Floodplain Managers in Madison. And that's Jake Thickman, and I hope to bring Jake maybe to the annual meeting. So, that.
All right, I think I'm going to do a little bit of stuff there. So I think I'm going to talk into this mic. It's on.
Turn it on.
Is it?
No.
No?
There's a little dumb mic up there.
Okay. I think I could talk loud enough, I hope, so that you can all hear me. So Mike actually has bronchitis, but he sounds pretty good right now, so he must be recovering. See, he was sounding pretty raspy a couple days ago. I wasn't sure whether he'd be able to speak. So I rely a little bit more on my notes than Mike, so I'm going to hide back here and read off them a little bit, but I'll try not to directly read off them. So first of all, thanks to everybody that participated in the development of the Wisconsin Land Information Program Plan. It was really quite an effort from the whole community. It took about 6 months to develop. We worked with the Wisconsin Land Information Council closely on this, meeting with them 5 times to talk about various draft versions. We got over 80 pages of comments from the community, and we realized that it takes a lot of effort from an organization to get everybody together and to agree, come to somewhat of a consensus on language to go into a letter to send it to you. So we understand for each letter sent, there's in some cases multiple hours of discussion behind that letter. And we did read through all the letters several times, discuss the points, and we weren't able to address all or include all the recommendations in the plan because it wouldn't be internally coherent, or it would be contradictory if it did, because there's such a diverse array of opinions out there. But we hope that we came onto language that everybody could somewhat come together on. So during this little talk, I'm going to talk about the context and the role of the plan's recommendations, briefly overview, and the implementation, in particular development of 2018 Strategic Initiative Grant benchmarks. And then Jim's going to talk in more detail about this benchmark developments, particularly for LiDAR and aerial imagery. First, the plan includes a good overview of the history of the program, and that's in part thanks to Don Dittmar, chair of the Wisconsin Land Information Council, for early on recommending that we give an overview of the history and also helping draft some of that history. And the history does date back quite a ways, almost as long as this organization, the Wisconsin Land Information Association, which was instrumental in creating the Land Information Program in 1989, and with grants going out shortly thereafter. When we look at some of these older documents, some of the same challenges exist today, and we hope that we're finally overcoming those challenges and achieving the objectives of the vision of the WLIP originally laid out back in 1991. Since 2013, when Act 20 was passed, which really reinvigorated the Land Information Program, we have engaged in a lot of strategic planning and community involvement that included the development of the planning process framework that started off the post-Act 20 2013 developments, and this laid out the basis for the strategic initiative grants that went out in 2016. We put out the V1 interim report, which laid out those original parcel benchmarks that included the data formatting, completing the parcel fabric in some counties, and improving the geospatial accuracy of parcel mapping with integration and completion of PLSS. We also updated the County Land Information Plan instructions, which is guides county land records modernization. Additionally, we created the position description for the Geographic Information Officer. We moved it out of the IT department at DOA into the Intergovernmental Relations part of the WLIP. We worked to create the Wisconsin Land Information Council. We developed a V2 Parcel Schema, which instituted standards for county parcel data for integration into the statewide parcel map. And finally, as I mentioned, we worked with the community and the Land Information Council to develop this program plan for the WLIP, which should guide the program for the next 5 years. So the role of the plan, and when I say guide, I'm saying that in terms of it's a living document, and that we don't intend that the plan serve for 5 years and then we look at each other and say what to do now. Instead, we want the plan to be updated within 3 years. It can be amended at any time, and at a minimum, the Wisconsin Land Information Council should review and monitor the progress on an annual basis. The plan is meant to give structure and predictability to the program, but not lock it in, as I said, to this a five-year track. Instead, we should remain flexible and adaptable in implementing the plan. Externally, it gives the community goals, objectives, and future budgeting guidelines, but internally, it's a DOA staff work plan. So it lays out what we think we can commit to over the course of the next few years. So just an overview of the recommendations of the plan. It recommends continuing to allocate the strategic initiative grant funding equally among the counties. Found that this works well. There's a variety of variables you could use in determining grant eligibility. And every county picks the one that suits them best, whether it's land area, population, progress. Dividing up the funding has worked well so far, so we're going to continue with that model based on the Land Information Council's recommendation. However, we are going to expand the funding eligibility for strategic initiative grant funding to open data, LiDAR, and aerial imagery. We're going to continue to develop statewide parcel map in collaboration with the State Cartographer's Office. This has worked well for versions 1 and 2, and we're going to continue at least through version 4 with the State Cartographer's Office. We instituted standards for the V2 Parcel Map, and we laid that out in a very detailed submission documentation manual for each county. And it includes guidelines for 41 core parcel attributes, as well as things like condo modeling, projection, and so forth. So there's a lot in there, and we didn't expect that every county would be able to meet all the specifications for submittal of parcel data to the statewide parcel map from the get-go, so with V2. With that understanding, we reviewed, actually the technical staff at the State Cartographer's Office reviewed all of the county parcel data as they ingested it and integrated it into the statewide parcel map, and created observation reports that detail what every county needs to do in order to achieve DOA's searchable format standard for parcel data. And we hope that the counties find this useful and will engage with us if there are any questions or issues in meeting the standard. So in addition to developing the statewide parcel map, we're also moving forward with facilitating greater access to county data. So we've made great strides on this issue with parcel data, but now we're looking at the other foundational elements. And Minnesota's example is very informative to our development of the open data concept. First, we recognize that counties are the stewards of county data. They're the authoritative source for local land records, and that's not going to change. So what we want to change is that these the stewards of the data make it more easily accessible online in a way that's convenient to find and easy to download, so that we add more value to the WLIP funded data. Because as Jeff pointed out earlier in the presentation, the more users you have, the more valuable the data is. And that's our intent, is to add value to the WLIP by making it more accessible. So in doing this, we're going to work with counties to make their data online, in particular the foundational elements of the WLIP funded data. So it's available for download, easy to find, and we would like that this, when we say easy to find, we would like that the data be indexed, be listed in a way that is straightforward, so there's really no need to search across multiple county web pages and so forth. Because having visited many county web pages, I know it makes sense to each individual county, so if you do business in one county, you eventually learn the system, you figure it out. But when you're visiting multiple county websites, it's hard to find some of the data that people are looking for. So we want to fix that. And then we also want to have an overlaying portal, WLIP portal, so that the user has one point of access to all the county foundational elements across the state. And this doesn't mean that we're going to collect all the county foundational elements. Rather, we just want to make it easy for people to find county data on county websites so they can get the data they need to download. So the devil's in the details, and that's what we're going to be working out over the course of the next few months. We're going to send out a survey next month that has a detailed definition of open data, what the requirements would be, what layers we're specifically talking about, so that we can all kind of agree moving forward what the basis should be for open data. And then we'll take that information that you provide in the survey we send out and further develop the open data benchmark, and then put that draft version out for a public review and comment in February before the annual Land Information Association conference. So when I'm talking about this concept for open data and counties being the stewards and so forth, this is I think a good first step that will move the state much further. And that's not to preclude some future grander, more comprehensive solution that could be in the form of a repository at the statewide level, or something that emulates the Minnesota Data Commons. Instead, we hope that this moves the state forward, and it could be an intermediary step towards something that's more comprehensive in nature in terms of a geoportal repository solution. And actually, the Wisconsin Land Information Council asked that the Geographic Information Officer, Jim, continue to research more comprehensive, complex solutions. So the most immediate task for implementation of the plan is the development of the 2018 grant benchmarks. And this includes open data, but also aerial imagery and LiDAR, which Jim's going to talk about. And like I said, just to repeat, there will be a survey going out next month, and we ask you to take some time to look at that, to fill out that survey and respond. And it will take a little more time than the typical 5-minute survey that you're accustomed to, because there's a lot of information to digest and think about and respond to. And we're asking that all county land information officers respond to it, because it will be the 2016 WLIP survey, so in that sense it's mandatory, but then it's also open to everyone else in the community to offer input. February 2017, we'll have the draft benchmarks ready for public review and input. June 2017, we hope to have them finalized and then incorporated in the 2018 grant application, which should come out later in the summer, at the latest October. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jim for discussion of development of LiDAR and aerial imagery benchmarks.
Okay. So I just felt more comfortable having some slides with maps on it because we're map people. So there'll be maps later on. I have to begin the LiDAR part by kind of discussing where we are in the whole scheme of things. And so it's real nice with Nathan talking about his county, and it points out that we're in kind of a nice situation that there's a large chunk of federal money that's become available for LiDAR. So part of this process is figuring out how those converge and everybody gets what they want. And it's not a simple thing, but it's kind of fun because it's, you're playing with other people's money and trying to move things forward. So in general, I've been trying to follow some general principles, and you've heard a lot about that today from the open data discussion point of view. We certainly want to complete the coverage of the state. We're getting very close to that. We want to get the older data sets, the 2005 and those kind of vintage, up to a more modern imagery and formats, and then this whole discussion about getting stuff more open, getting it out there, getting it used, making it publicly accessible. And LiDAR data is a real toughie because it's not like it's not like your nice imagery. It takes some knowledge of how to use it, and but it has a lot of potential. So that kind of leads to the next two things: increasing the usability, making products that are meaningful to you out of it, and then in general, just increasing your ability to understand the data, to apply it to certain problems, and to get stuff done. And so I included their nice little picture of the flooding up north. The Highway 13 got blown out in several places, and so LiDAR becomes an important thing of being able to quickly assess damage or predict where these kinds of events will have an impact before it happens, and maybe in the regular schedule of updates, make the culvert bigger or turn it into something else that can handle it. So that's kind of where I'm starting from, and of course all of this has to link in with the plan, and in a nice logical way has to fit into that structure. So here's where we are right now. This is my lousy map of strange colors. But everything in those last 6 sets of colors, the yellows and reds and things, that's all the older data sets that are probably eligible now for the federal money. The 5 or 6 dark gray areas are counties that don't have any LiDAR at all. The lighter gray ones are currently in the 3DEP program or in their own county program in either this year or last year. So they're getting close. So again, we're getting really close to having at least a single coverage or a single everybody covered once. Okay, and then again through the program, through the 3DEP program, we can start to chip away at getting the older data sets into something that's a little more closer to modern reality. So I just included some of those. Okay, so since 2014. These are the data sets that are kind of in play. The lighter blue ones are counties that were funded almost entirely by FEMA. They kind of swoop in and do a project, and then they swoop out, but they leave data in their path, and so we sweep it up and put it on the Wisconsin View website. The dark green ones are some of the counties that are currently in the 3DEP program. So I should explain that 3DEP is a federal program. It came out of essentially Obama's climate initiative, and so it'll pay up to generally 50% of the cost of a new acquisition at a certain level of quality and format. And so this has been a really good thing for some of our counties to grab onto and to make their projects a little more happen a little faster. So looking at that, once we get what's done in the pipeline here, it really leaves about 4 counties that don't have anything. So these tend to be large counties. They tend to be rural counties, and so the challenge will be to figure out how to make our program WLIP help them get the projects done, as well as take advantage of the federal money and then whatever else we can scrape up as well. This also shows what we've just submitted in the last 2 weeks. There's an annual 3DEP cycle, and so the counties in yellow there, 4 of those are with our friends at AIRS. They're the contractor of choice, and then Dodge County had their own contractor set up. So these are kind of it's a yearly what I call, you roll the dice, you put your proposal in, and hopefully you get some money out of it. And it's always a nervous time of year because you're competing with 49 other states. So we've been really successful in the last 2 years in getting essentially what we've asked for. So it's a good program. Then there's these little things down in the southeast corner that have also submitted proposals. These are mainly through the Sewer Pack RPC. One proposal is reprocessing the 2015 LiDAR, and the other one is for Kenosha and Racine County. They're trying to latch on to a northern Illinois project, and The cool thing about this project is it's with something called Geiger mode LiDAR, and so it's kind of like the next generation of LiDAR. So it's at a much higher density, same level of accuracy, but a much higher level of number of points per square meter. So we'll see how that happens. What happens there? Okay. So. Now this is kind of getting into the whole open data thing, and as Peter mentioned, the council and others have said, you meaning me, go figure out some of these things, do some research on what this open data thing means and repositories and that sort of thing. So I've been working with the Wisconsin View folks, working with State Cartographer's Office, the Map Library, DNR, and NRCS to see what public data sets are out there, particularly in the southern part of the state. This is all the data that came out of the 2008 floods. So we've been trying to find those and scrape them up and get the point clouds and get the DEMs and get them on the Wisconsin website. And this also shows some of the counties have their own LiDAR data on their own open data site, and then there's a bunch that aren't there yet. And so this is part of the process of figuring out what are some of the options going to be for open data. And Wisconsin View is easy because it's relatively cheap to set up, but it also has a very small level of maintenance because of it's not very well funded. But that's part of figuring out what we're going to do in the future. Some of that usability stuff, there are a number of applications that LiDAR is good at, but it takes some additional work, and so this is just an example of one of those, figuring out where culverts are and other conveyances to move water, so that you can do things like watershed modeling or other stuff. So that's part of the discussion as well. And then lastly, the whole thing about user training. And so working with Howard at SCO about let's see if we can start figuring out user training, getting people comfortable using these vast data sets and doing what they need to do. Because there's a lot of folks that are going to be new to this because of all the work with 3DIP. There was a bunch of counties that did WROC in 2015, and so it's trying to figure out ways to help all of those to better use their stuff. And there's a little survey out there to that effect, okay, to help us figure out what that training is going to look like. So I'm mainly talking about LiDAR here and how the benchmarks are going to be applied to that and how it's going to kind of play out over the next 3 to 5 years. 3DEP is a program in transition. I was lucky enough to be able to listen in on the 3DEP working group for the last couple days, and so the program as it is right now is probably going to change a lot. We don't really know what those changes are going to be, but they're going to hopefully become a more multi-year and rely more on state planning. So instead of just kind of the crapshoot that it is right now, and which I think is good, because I think if we get our act together, work through the program, work with our partners, we'll compete really well with the other states, because particularly because we're close to the end. We're not like Nevada or someplace that's just so vast and so big that they don't have any LiDAR. Okay, so that's a good thing that we're at the point we're at. I just threw aerial imagery in here as well. It's a little bit different of a beast because it's still pretty much a county program, and it'll probably remain that for the foreseeable future. But again, it's going to be figuring out how to make that data open, how to make it more usable, how to get the benefits out there. And the LiDAR in some ways is kind of easier at this point because there's all this federal money that's kind of shaking the tree a little bit, and there's nothing comparable on the imagery side, so it's pretty well defined. So I'm actually hoping that by working on doing the research on the LiDAR stuff, where it's going to go, how we're going to use it, how we're going to train for it, we'll work out some of these questions about how to do these other data sets. And LiDAR is probably the biggest one, with imagery coming in a close second. So if we can figure out the big one, these other things, hopefully will start to fall into place, and we'll be able to answer, what is the repository going to look like? What is the infrastructure that's going to deliver this to the majority of the users going to look like? And we're going to work through those in the next couple of years. Okay, so that's really it. We have our schedule that we're working under. You've got ideas for what these benchmark things should be. You should certainly talk to us. And we're going to do the survey, but by all means, talk to us, and we're here to listen. So.
Okay. Questions? Jim?
So when you guys talk about benchmarks, I think of that as an expectation, meaning there's a certain expectation from WLIP for open data, certain expectation for aerial imagery, et cetera. And you talked about, looking at the timeline that Peter handed out, the survey is going to be coming out, you said next month. What I'm not quite clear on, maybe you can address this, is what's the process for specifically defining those benchmarks? I mean, I think I heard you say at the end, Jim, that send us your feedback, but is there a more formal process of defining these benchmarks beyond send me an email? How do you see this moving forward as far as those specific 3 benchmarks at this point?
Starting with the survey.
I think also you could say it starts with the program plan. So the program plan, for instance, on page 24 has a...
Peter, can you stand up, please?
Oh, yeah,
Thanks.
sorry. To answer Jim Lacey's question, it says, where do you start or how do you develop the benchmarks? And I think it starts with the program plan. So we got a lot of input from stakeholder groups and in the categories of aerial imagery, LiDAR, and open data during the planning process. And the plan includes some of that information as a starting point for developing benchmarks. For instance, on page 24 of the program plan, it gives provisional definition of open data and what that means. So I think that's a good place to start. Since this plan was adopted August 9th, we've been researching the topic open data more, and that will be reflected in the survey content. So the survey will include more detailed definition of open data, what the requirements would be from counties, what layers would be included under that definition to be made available for download. And also to get to your question, what does benchmark mean? So benchmark also means, as it relates to strategic initiative grants, funding eligibility categories. So how can you use the strategic initiative funding and it would be to meet certain objectives of the program as specified with the term benchmarks.
So the survey is really the first key starting place for more specifically defining these benchmarks, is what I'm hearing?
From moving forward from the plan, yes.
Peter, with your parcel mapping initiative, have you been tracking the hits on that, where they're coming from, downloads? What kind of activity are you seeing on it?
Yes, and I would say it's not mine, it's Wisconsin's parcel initiative. So, yes, I know with the version 1, there were 1,000 downloads within a month or two of that file geodatabase. And as we know, that takes a relatively sophisticated user to want to download a multi-gigabyte file onto their computer to use it. I'm not sure yet with V2, that just came out, the database on August 31st. I guess we should have stats on number of downloads, number of views of the web app, but I don't know those off the top of my head. But there is a wide variety of usage, that's for sure.
I'll just add to that. So when V2 just recently came out, we have a realtor, of course, on our Land Information Council, and he works in the Fox Valley, which of course with Appleton and Green Bay and all the various communities in 6 different counties, whatever it is. He was thrilled to see a statewide standard and to see that just the app. I don't think he downloaded that, but just to be able to even, and he knows that the data is not quite correct, but just to be able to, look for properties that are, certain acreage or view the tax payment from 2015 or whatever it was, just to have that all in one standard place instead of having to go to 6 different counties. He was pretty excited about that. He actually then forwarded that link to Realtors, whatever his email group was, and was trying to spread the word, but it got me wondering, what else we're doing to sort of market that. And I don't know if there are other sort of marketing efforts just to make people aware that it's out there.
Well, yeah, well, I guess last year about this time at this facility, the governor had his Northern Economic Summit, and the cabinet came and talked about things that they're doing, their individual agencies are doing to promote economic development, specifically in northern Wisconsin. The one item that our agency secretary talked about was the parcel mapping project. And Peter and Davida went to the effort of, garnering, some of the anecdotal information and testimonies from users of the V1 map. So, our secretary gave his spiel about it. I wasn't quite sure how much he even really understood it. But I should say, after he gave that discussion, an executive from Johnson Bank came up to him and told him how excited she was about this. So yeah, I think that we need to have more sort of quantitative and sort of anecdotal evidence of how people are using it to sort of continue to make the case for people like our agency secretary.
So as I hear it, it sounds like there are plans through V4, correct? And just beyond that might be a wait and see if there's enough support to continue that effort, or?
I guess the collaboration with SCO, with the State Congress Office, is through V4. By V4, we want all the counties to be meeting the searchable format standard so that the parcel data is much more easily integrated into a statewide layer. And we intend that at that point that we can have more than annual updates, so that the goal is to have a statewide layer that's authoritative, that's has automated aggregation, and allows for asynchronous updates. So as the county parcel is updated, the statewide layer can be updated. So we don't want to plan too much beyond V4. That doesn't mean that the parcel ownership ends at that point. It's just that as we learn by doing, it's hard to plan out several iterations in advance.
I have a question for Jim. With the LiDAR effort, that's great. And I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but return on investment, are there any conversations with the DNR for those counties that have not had their floodplain maps updated to take on that effort now that we have that data?
That's a real good question, because I hear it a lot that, oh, as soon as we get our LiDAR, they're gonna update our floodplain maps. And everything I've heard from people that work with FEMA, or it's real hard to actually talk to a FEMA person, I found out. They're kind of mysterious and, yeah. Anyway, that, even in the case where you're on their radar and they're updating something, either the coastal inundation or floodplain, those things take years, and so using the floodplain map argument is I think kind of a stretch, and so the thing where we should probably, the way to take that conversation is using your LiDAR, using your DEM more in the emergency management part. So in the case of this person here who has handled 3 floods this summer, it becomes another conversation to have, that you've got this. You can now do more on-the-fly modeling of where the water is going in a flood situation, and so those things become, I think, are becoming more important, because that FEMA argument is such a stale.
Well, I would caution you on that, because when it comes to flood disasters, the FEMA floodplain map is what sets the funding. If you're using bad data from FEMA, and you have a flood outside of what they call a floodplain, and your new updated model shows it's irrelevant.
I totally get that,
it's a
Fred.
good point.
But it's it's trying to move the elephant.
Well, then I guess I would encourage DEM to be more involved in this and try to get in on FEMA's radar, because I work at our EOC. We're doing a long-term disaster planning, and they, by statute, by rules that they develop, they have to put it in floodplain context.
Right. Well,
they're not interested in what we come up with.
Having more disasters is one way to do it, and we seem to be on that track.
That's after the fact that
Unfortunately, that's the way it happens. Yeah. So I know you hate to hear about Iowa again, but after the 2008 flood, we got money to redo all the floodplain maps, and it was because it was a $10 billion flood. So.
And I know that they're queuing up new legislation related on a federal level on flood insurance, and there may be a cause and effect there as well. And I don't know if Jason Lauman's here, if he wants to talk about that at all. If he is, he probably doesn't want to talk about it. But yeah, so I met last week with Pew Charitable Trust talking about that, and that's one of their causes of late is dealing with flood insurance. Back.
Maybe just a comment and a question too on the LiDAR side of things is, I think from my observations, it is a roll of the dice to get the 3DEP funding in. There's no guarantees. But I think as a state and as an organization and counties, we've been well coordinated compared to others. So I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, but there's been a lot of local support at the county level. There's been good coordination through WLIP and the DOA. So I think we're well positioned to bring in that funding. But it's just one funding source for LiDAR. And I think we need to be open to all funding sources. And I think our plan as we look at the WLIP shouldn't necessarily be based on 3DEP per se. We need to have our own plan for LiDAR and updating LiDAR in Wisconsin that works for us, and then we'll pull in any funding sources that we can, knowing right now that 3DEP is predominant and we've pursued it and we've been successful, and we're well coordinated in doing that. But I guess as we think about updating LiDAR in Wisconsin and how that ties in with the WLIP plan. I'm curious what the thoughts are on, meeting that LiDAR benchmark into the future for when counties start doing the projects again and start bringing and use WLIP money for it.
So, right now, 3DEP is set up on a theoretical 8-year cycle, and so unless there's a really good reason, your proposal will be looked at less favorably if, like, you're trying to do it every 5 years and something like that, unless you've had like major flooding or changes in the landscape, those kind of things. So yeah, that's part of the equation. The reality of it is they don't have enough money to do it every 8 years anyway. So what happens beyond that 8 years is kind of anybody's guess at this point. And the technology is going to change. It's going to get better. It's probably going to get cheaper. There's all these other kind of things. Jason was asking me about this at the break, and it's really hard to put see into the crystal ball and try to plan a 10-year budget, which was his question. So yeah, again, I think our task is to come up with a reasonable plan for the next 3 to 5 years that includes any kind of funding that we're able to get. I'm working with our friends at Forest County here, and we're trying some different stuff, and hopefully that'll open up some other avenues. So, but we just got to try. It'll be an ongoing discussion, and I think the sooner we have kind of an idea of what that state plan is going to be, then we'll be ready for when USGS changes the BAA process. So.
I've got another follow-up LiDAR thing on training. I think the survey will be good, and developing some resources is a good idea. But if you want something right now, the place that I have gone, and since we already had 2 Minnesota speakers today, University of Minnesota has a really good resource already online, course materials, YouTube videos on LiDAR and conservation, delineating watersheds and forestry applications. It exists already.
Well, there's like 100 different things you can do with LiDAR,
Yep,
which is great. So there's usually somebody out there doing what you kind of want to do already. What really my hope is to kind of develop our user community into more of a community, so that we can kind of tell each other the secret recipe for some things. So yeah.
I like to follow lightning. Go quickly.
Lots to talk about LiDAR. I just want to follow up by saying, is there a general reason there is more emphasis being put on LiDAR right now than aerial imagery, in the sense of, is it only because of the funding?
Funding helps.
And that
It really comes down to that.
But there is funding. There's a SIG grant. There's funding for imagery. The plan has laid it out. There is money available to counties to do aerial photography. And there's also talk that the state now wants to go off and do their own aerial photography. State agency.
We're one of the counties that don't have LiDAR right now, and because of the funding help for LiDAR right now, we are going after it, but we did tie in aerial imagery as part of that project, because it is just as important to get that as it is for LiDAR for us.
any follow-ups?
I want to go back to Jim's first question about the
who's setting the standards and stuff. And I guess the way I'm hearing is that the user community is to kind of sit back and wait to hear from you. Should maybe we have a working group established? Because we're really looking at standards for LiDAR, aerial imagery. We've got the parcel standard. All these things are out there. We haven't even begun to talk about any of the other addresses for next gen 911. So we're ready with that, or center lines and all this stuff. Could we be a little bit more efficient by instead of waiting for you guys to do all the work?
Well, I think it's going to be an iterative process. It's going to start with the survey, and it won't happen in a vacuum. At the very least, there, of course, there's the Land Information Council, and I think that we're looking back to the example that we did in developing the plan. But I think that we'll know more after the survey.
But you guys can only do so much. Where I'm thinking maybe we have a few different working groups. You can get multiple things done at once instead of waiting, potentially a couple of years before we know what your definition or standard is for open data, or whether my LiDAR flight from 2015 meets that LiDAR standard. So those sorts of things. So I think speed the process a little bit.
If I could add to what Mike said, so I think for aerial imagery, LiDAR, and open data, I would wait for weeks for the survey to come, because we're researching the topics and working on it right now. So we won't want you to duplicate those efforts. But if there are other foundational elements for what you think there is a need for a standard, and you can identify one, by all means, we don't want to stop any creative efforts or efforts to come up with standards for data sets such as you mentioned, address points or street center lines. And if you can get buy-in from other groups, that's all the better, and forward it to the Land Information Council. The Land Information Council views it as a worthwhile standard. They can recommend it to DOA to include as a strategic initiative grant benchmark. So by all means, if you're interested in creating additional standards beyond open data, aerial imagery, parcels, and LiDAR, go for it.
Can I have a phone first? Adam?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of these foundational layers you're talking about, I sit on the council, there's certain things that I think we can expedite and move forward and utilize those communities. You've been sitting on it for a while, but there's certain pieces out there, especially when you're talking about conversations about aerial imagery and aerial LiDAR. There's explicit specifications that can be followed from organizations like ASPRS that talk about what these specs need to be. 3DAP defines what the specifications are for QL2 specifications. Those change over time, but I think a task force or a committee or this Jim or whoever can pretty much take those specs and say, these are these national standards. The goal is to get this funding. This is what we're going to need. There's multiple other foundational layers that we're looking at and talking about as those next steps, even within the WLIP plan where it's written for its expansion. So those pieces can be addressing or center lines and other pieces, and you can look at places like Next Gen 911 where we're going to have to utilize those key layers and get those into those systems, and we can start to look and see what those specs are. So when we start on those federal standards, and we have those discussions happening now so that those counties that are far enough along on the WLIP plan that are looking for those next steps, we really need to be talking about those versus the things that we're already pointing to a federal spec for LiDAR, which I can cut and paste out of this thing and give you the standard for what that is to meet FEMA or USGS spec. It's right there and done. We should be talking about these other layers of people that are saying we need to get that addressing, we need to work with center lines, we need to work with some of that. But I agree with Justin. There's 72 counties and multiple municipalities that are creating these data sets that need some of those answers. They shouldn't be creating something and have to wait 2 or 3 years when they're ready to work on it now. Maybe they did it not to the standard. We need to push them out. I think the survey's great, but we need to get up and running on this.
I would agree with that, Adam. I'm not worried about your LiDAR, frankly. You know, it's modern. It's, you know, these guys did it. You know, it really is. They're fairly narrowly defined right now. So I think I'd be more interested to hear what people are thinking about the open data things, and then the future data sets, what those might be.
Real quick, buddy. But to that, you know, if you say, all right, let's just adopt the USGS, specification, well, then our 2015 flight doesn't meet that, so well, out, you know. So that's,
Yeah, my
you know, so you can do that, but that's not really, you know, is that our Wisconsin standard? Like, what should be our bare minimum?
Yeah, I need it greater than that. I mean, anytime you need to look back and say you did in 2015, what is the spec? It didn't exist at the time. You know, so there's some grandfathering thing and the timelines for those that's totally accurate on data sets of years. I think that's right. In the same way, municipalities should be looking at these things too, not just totally focused on communities. This is my view, but a municipality should be able to look at it and say, even through that spec, doesn't do, even though it's twice the density, say, what county's LiDAR is, still it's not going to do everything that a community can use that for, and utilities and transportation and some of these other pieces. So you could actually have a couple different specs based on what your use is. Imagery for the foresters in Wisconsin, 18 inches good enough. It's never going to work for, let's say, one.
Right?
So I have a follow-up, Peter, on other data sets, and Adam mentioned it, NextGen 911. A paper just came out, a letter from the Wisconsin Interoperability Council to the governor about NextGen 911 and the requirements. And if you look through this document, it's heavy on radio, telecommunications, all that stuff, which is vital for communications people. But there's nothing in here about GIS. And that's the critical piece. And I think we need to get ahead of it. I think we need to get involved in this council a little bit more. And I think we also need to start developing some standards for those data sets and not wait. The other piece I'd like to add is Minnesota did something very interesting in that they tied part of the telecommunications fee for cell phone use to the development and funding of their geospatial commons. These are the types of things we lament about, oh, we're going to create a portal, but we don't have a repository because we don't know how to do it, and DET doesn't want to do this or that. I think we need to get ahead of this, and going into this budget process, we need to take advantage of that.
Speaking to that specifically, DOA recognizes that 100% that GIS is a huge component of that. WLA does. Justin will be going to the meeting on the 25th.
These are the converted. I get that. These are the converted.
Right, but they're going to
these
be there.
guys,
They're going to be
they
there.
haven't read the good book yet.
Right, but they're going to be there as a representation on this working group, the interoperability board, for that conversation. And it's very recognized right now that that is an important thing coming down the road.
I guess my concern, this is a letter that's going to the governor, and GIS wasn't even mentioned. And I think that's
we recognize that, yes.
Yeah, Fred, when I saw that, I started looking into the group and who wrote that and everything. I noticed that Andy Faust was a member on that committee. Started talking to him. He noticed that WLA had a seat on there, but we hadn't appointed anybody. Talked to Martin about that, and even myself as past president, I wasn't even aware that we had a seat there. They didn't communicate that with us or whatever. So
I was not aware they had a seat on WLA also.
So
they didn't reach out to multiple organizations to start that.
So now we have a few. We've got 3 GIS people that are on there. A couple, 2 county LIOs, and then Andy Faust. So we'll be better represented on there now.
Reeling back, I'd like to finish because it's getting to lunchtime, but I want to ask one question about WLIC. And where, related to a DOA and public comment, where does DOA see WLIC fit in as far as public comment goes? Is WLIC considered to you an integral part of the working of it, or is it considering it on the public comment side of things? I'm confused personally about that.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, sort of two prongs. I mean, the WLIC is a vehicle to generate public comment, but we also share it with them. So, because we have, the members represent different sectors, and the idea is that they're going to reach out to their constituency when we need that, and it'll be a vehicle for us to garner public comment. That'll help review the sum total, you know.
Okay, but as you're doing the internal workings of it, are you also going to be using the WLIC in the internal workings as you're developing it to February?
I guess I'll just speak up.
Peter, can you stand, please?
Yeah, sorry. The Land Information Council isn't scheduled to meet till February. So we're going to develop the draft standards and then see their input. And before then, we'll get some public review back, and so we can discuss the public review with the Land Information Council. And we understand that they represent a vast array of sector interests, so we take their comments seriously.
Okay, so no, it doesn't.
Okay.
So my understanding is you guys at DOA do not plan on reaching out to the WLIC until February when you guys have this stuff developed?
That's correct. We engaged a lot during the development of this plan, and we don't want to over-engage the council. Busy people, we have so much time and energy to look at and react to. So we want to have a fully fleshed out benchmark concepts before we present it to them.
Okay. I'm going to come out and say I disagree with that, simply because I believe the WLIC is a tool for you as you're developing this. My personal opinion is I think you should engage them.
Yeah, what if the council wants to be engaged, Peter?
I think we're always, as Mike always points out, we're always open to comment, engagement, discussions, meetings, phone calls from anybody, including and especially council members. So it doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from them, but we don't have something to present to them for their feedback until February. So we value the time and we want to use it accordingly.
You said in an email that you sent it out, the community will have an opportunity to help develop several sets of benchmark standards by June 30th, 2017.
Right.
Do you think it's reasonable that engagement is a survey?
Well, it'll start with the survey.
Yeah,
And
it's an iterative process. It's just going to start with that because it's not going to be one and done. It's going to be just like the plan was. So, and going on, the very first meetings I had with Don was the council's there to help us respond to things. So I think it's perfectly consistent with what we're doing. And so what comes out in February isn't going to be, it's not going to be done. We'll be working from there. It's a first draft. It's something to respond to.
What standards are going to be defined for review in February?
So that would be the 3 new strategic initiative grant funding categories. So open data, LiDAR, and aerial imagery.
So those 3 will have standards for, or
Draft standards,
draft
right.
standard for open for review.
Right.
Talks.
Yes.
And then, did we lay out any other timeline for standards that we're talking about, or frameworks like so
It's assumed that once we have those established, there could be new ones created for 2019 grants or beyond. But if the community wanted to start working on additional standards like Justin was talking about, they could start looking at what national standards are out there, what does Wisconsin want to adopt, and so forth.
Peter, could just make a suggestion as we watch some of the legislation, and if there's something that's starting with this next gen 911 that we maybe start focusing on access points and center lines.
Yeah, we will. I had a conversation with David Cadgigal about it a month ago. So making sure that he remembered that. He remembered that we're working on this parcel map. Remember that there's resources there that can afford you because he's really integrated, into the 911 issues. So we are.
Justin, last question, last comment.
Yeah, maybe Eric Demka, you might know more, but I know the email that you had sent out earlier this week had 5 or so bullet points of what the House Republicans were looking at. I guess the priorities going into the state budget. One of them was a funding mechanism and next to 911 implementation, something along those lines. So it's probably going to be here next spring. I mean, as far as that conversation and the next budget. Who knows where that goes? Might have another fire and police protection fee or something.
If that's truly the case, then too, February may be too late.
Yes.
Because if we're talking about legislature, they're going to be in session, they're all going to be sworn in January, they're going to start session up.
Well, but it doesn't mean that we have to have the data models or a set couch, but we need to have some kind of a plan about how is it that we're going to get there for them and have that fleshed out to present to the legislators so they can understand what we're doing.
All right, we have to cut off the conversation because,
And just one thing on communications. I don't want anyone to feel like that there needs to be a formal process to talk to anybody associated with the Land Information Program. You know, you've got a meeting, you want us there, call us. You have a question, don't worry about the rumor tree, call us. You know, you're wondering how we're doing on the benchmarks, call us. You're wondering why you haven't seen the survey yet, call us. You know, we try to be available, and you know, if we don't think that we're being available, you know, tell Don and he'll call us. You know? So I just, you know, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, and we've come a long way since 2013. So and we did. No one person did it alone. No one organization did it alone. So just don't think that we're scheming or don't want to talk to you.
So Mike, no.
Okay.
Right. There's no scheming. There's we want to see things happen.
Right. Yeah, we
It
do
just
too.
seems like
And
push.
you're looking at most of the WLIP right here.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so we're doing what we can.
Right.
well, I think we should thank all of our